Hola, comrades! Today's topic of interest, Splatoon 2. Nintendo is a company known for its core IPs, meaning Mario and Pokémon and Zelda, these series that even someone's uncool mom could identify. They stick with these franchises, and for good reason, they work. They garner massive critical acclaim and sell millions of copies, so eyebrows were raised when Nintendo announced, of all things, a shooter. And what a shooter it was. Taking place in a modern urban environment where squidlings, beings that are both kids and squids, shoot ink at one another while wearing the latest street fashion trends, Splatoon was unlike any Nintendo game ever released. The only thing it had in common with the likes of Mario and Pikmin was how weird it was. Well, that and one other thing. Its quality. The experiences Nintendo crafts are unique and powerful, enough so that there is no company more associated with gaming. The Big N has been an industry leader for over 30 years, which in itself is insane considering how much gaming has changed since then. But despite its longevity, Nintendo's games don't feel old-fashioned or stale. Of course, Nintendo has produced some poor games over the years, but in regard to the series that they are associated with, they are pretty much batting 1,000. How is that? What makes the masses flock to their games decade after decade? How do they continuously update their franchises without making it seem like they are overtly recycling themselves? Something that both the film industry and many other game companies constantly struggle at. What's the secret behind their success? Let's look at Splatoon 2 as a case study. After the success of the first Splatoon on the unsuccessful Wii U, Nintendo made the sensible decision to release a sequel on the more successful Switch, both bolstering the success of that system and introducing the series to those who never bothered to get a Wii U because they viewed it as a worthless piece of junk that added nothing to what Nintendo had already established with the Wii, or at least felt that the Wii U didn't offer enough to justify the purchasing of a new console. Aside from improved graphics and a new mode, Salmon Run, Splatoon 2 doesn't offer a significantly different gameplay experience from its predecessor, but you do feel like you're playing a genuinely different game. There's just enough that twists the experience and makes it fresh. The story is a good example. The stars of the first Splatoon game were inarguably the Squid sisters, Callie and Marie. Despite not actually being sisters, they were close, real close. But then after the final Splatfest, in which Marie triumphed over Callie, they began to grow apart until finally Callie disappeared, and so did the great Zapfish. Not wanting the world to know, Marie recruits a young squidling to help look for her sister. It's nothing spectacular, and the story is honestly very similar to that of the first Splatoon, but you feel like you're getting your money's worth. Which brings us to my first point, the first secret of Nintendo's success. Number 1, don't let the story get in the way. This may seem like blasphemy to some, and I understand that. I love story-driven games, and in fact, my 5 favorite games of all time are all story-driven. But not all games, or even all good games, need to have strong, compelling, intricate stories. You need a premise, but that's it. That's the magic of video games. You tell the player that they're a fat Italian plumber that needs to save a princess from a giant turtle monster, and they'll go with it. Being less story-driven puts more focus on the exploration and the gameplay. This was the default option back when Nintendo first dominated in the 1980s, and even now, in an era where many games have become extremely story-driven, it's still valid. If you don't have a strong story in a novel or film, people will get bored, but they will keep playing games that are very simple narratively. Even something more sophisticated like The Legend of Zelda is rather open-ended. You get the story injected into your experience after you clear a dungeon or at certain checkpoints, but for the most part, you can ignore what you're supposed to do and go off exploring. And because of that giving more freedom to the player than films give to the viewer and books to the reader, you don't have to change a whole lot between installments to keep your audience satisfied, so long as you give them new mechanics to work with and a new hook in the story. Instead of Mario going across the Mushroom Kingdom to save the princess from Bowser, he can go across an island resort or across outer space. In the case of Splatoon 2, this works similarly. You not only have to find the Great Zapfish, you also have to find Callie. Number 2. Let the game sell itself. Why would people want to play this? What makes it interesting? For gaming, evoking that instant, positive, visceral reaction, that feeling of, I want to play this, is vital. Right from the get-go, your game needs to convince your audience why it's worth playing. Trailers are vital. For the original Splatoon, you had this rad 90s aesthetic and these interesting Squid Kid hybrids. It immediately catches your eye, and then you see the gameplay. You're shooting at these Octarians, these octopus-like creatures, in single player, and then at your friends and their Inklings in multiplayer, splatting them with your ink. That's awesome, you think. I've never seen anything like this. I want to buy it. For sequels, one of the main elements to consider in letting the game sell itself is what's different this time. Take the newest games in the Pokémon series, Sun and Moon. What's different this time? Well, you're in Pokémon Hawaii, you get to use these awesome Z moves, and what's that? I get to ride all these different Pokémon anywhere I want? I'm buying. You see what I mean? For Splatoon 2, you have new mechanics. You have this new singing duo, Off the Hook, and you have this new quest to find Callie. Number 3. The player comes first. This may seem obvious, but it is at the core of Nintendo's appeal. It's more important than the previous two components combined. Many game companies make the focus of their games the story or the characters or the world or the mechanics, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Other forms of art, such as books or movies, have found great success in being primarily about the characters and story, as have many games. But that's not what Nintendo does. That's not their ideal. As opposed to, say, Square Enix, the experiences Nintendo provides are uniquely suited to gaming. They take the one aspect of gaming that's different from other art forms, the interactivity, and focus in on it. At the end of the day, The Legend of Zelda, Mario, Splatoon, what have you, are not about Link and Zelda, or Mario and Peach, or Callie and Marie. They're about you and your own experience. The goal isn't to be heartfelt or emotional or make a grand statement. No, the goal is to immerse you in the experience of playing the game. The story and characters are only instruments to that. This may be old-fashioned, but it still works today because it's very inclusionary. It includes as many people as possible, regardless of their interest, regardless of whether they're even interested in video games as an art form. And it also empowers them to let go of their own worlds and embrace what is possible in gaming. It's less a case of you having to be committed to the game, and more a case of the game being committed to you. Well, there you have it! Those are the 3 secrets behind Nintendo's blockbuster success across the last 3 decades. Now, for the record, this is not specifically the right way to make a game. There are many different philosophies and directions that can be successful. This is just what has made Nintendo such a successful and influential gaming company since well before I was born, and will keep it successful long after I'm dead. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today and want to support this channel, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce more amazing content. Anyway, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that sugar-sweet stuff. Adios, comrade!